So, in other words, these guys are trapped. You think they're soldiers, but they're not. What they really are hostages. Okay? Does that make sense? You have too many people in the country, so you can't get them out of the country, but you don't have enough people to actually launch a strike against Tehran. You can't resupply them. And they've been encircled by Iranian forces. All right? Does that make sense?
Esa palabra rehenes no es una exageración táctica. Cuando la Unión Soviética metió 115,000 soldados a Afganistán en 1979, creyó que controlaba el país por tener mejor armamento. Pero los combatientes locales cortaron cada paso de montaña y aislaron a los batallones rusos durante 10 años. 15,000 soldados muertos después, los soviéticos tuvieron que evacuar sin victoria. Dejar sin salida a tu propio ejército, por no entender el mapa topográfico, es una trampa letal que los imperios repiten sistemáticamente, pero escucha lo siguiente, que te va a dejar helado.
These forces that want war with Iran, ultimately it is the US military that must implement this war. And if the US military refuses to go to war, then the war can't happen. So we discussed that, unfortunately, the US military is very different from what it was 30 years ago. Okay? 30 years ago, the US military maintained very standard military doctrine. Okay? They maintained 3 very important principles that all militaries must maintain in a time of war. The first is mass forces. B is avoid encirclement, right? And the third is protect supply lines. Now, the important idea is that when you fight a war like this, okay, which is traditional warfare, you must have the consent of the public, okay? Because it is the public that sends soldiers, that provides money, that gives you political support. But in 2003, the US military changed its military doctrine to one of shock and awe. Okay? And what shock and awe means is that you don't have to follow these 3 principles anymore. You can use air supremacy. You also have technological omniscience. And you also have special forces. And this allows you to fight wars cheaply, quickly, and decisively so that you no longer need public political support for fighting wars. And as we also discussed, this created the idea of hubris in the American military. So the American military, because of the 2003 war in Iraq, are confident they can win any war, any place, against any enemy. We know that this doctrine is actually not true. And we know because of something called Operation Prosperity Guardian. Okay? So a few months ago, the Houthis, which are a rebel group in Yemen, they started to attack ships in the Red Sea, okay? And a lot of trade goes through the Red Sea.
Esa doctrina de conmoción y pavor le costó a Estados Unidos más de $2 billones, solo en la invasión de Irak de 2003, usando exactamente ese mismo modelo de ataque rápido desde el aire. La idea era entrar volando, destrozar la infraestructura del país y no necesitar tropas terrestres pesadas, exactamente el mismo guión que ahora te están vendiendo para el próximo desembarco. Y en pocos minutos vas a oír cómo se está ensayando, palabra por palabra, la misma promesa que ya pagaste hace 20 años.
Okay. So let's pretend that it's March 2027, okay? And Trump goes on TV. He announces Operation Iranian Freedom, a full-scale US invasion of Iran, along with Israel, Saudi Arabia as its main partners, but the United Kingdom, UK will be involved, Australia will be involved, UAE will be involved, Poland will be involved. Okay, so you have many countries attacking Iran together. And Trump goes on TV and explains to the American public why the United States is fighting this war. Okay, and this is what Trump says. First, he says that for the past year, there have been violent protests in Iran. You have religious protests, you have political protests, you have ethnic protests. The Iranian people are sick of the Ayatollah. They are sick of the dictatorship. They want democracy. They want freedom. And in response, the Revolutionary Guard are killing thousands of protesters. Iran is on the brink of civil war. Therefore, the United States has an obligation to protect the people of Iran. Okay? The people of Iran are praying for freedom and democracy, and the United States, the world's greatest democracy, must give them democracy. Okay? So the first reason is freedom and democracy. But don't worry. This invasion will be successful because we have a lot of allies. The UK, Israel, Saudi Arabia, all friends, we're part of this operation. Our special forces are already in the country looking for their air bases and their missiles. We can knock them out at the beginning of the war. Also, we have been in contact with Iranian opposition groups. They want to overthrow the regime. And when we help them, they will install democracy in the country. Our American military is the greatest in the world. In 1991, our military defeated Saddam Hussein in 100 hours. In 2003, our military defeated Saddam Hussein in less than 3 weeks. To prove that we are the greatest in the world, we will defeat Iran in only 2 weeks. So do not worry. We will be strong in protecting democracy, freedom, and global prosperity. Okay? So that's what Donald Trump will say to the people of the United States. Okay? And of course, you're going to have large-scale protests throughout the country opposing this war. But most people in the country will support this war. Okay?
Ese discurso que acabas de oír es la misma trampa que se usó en 2003 para entrar a Irak buscando armas de destrucción masiva que nunca aparecieron. Pero esta vez el operativo es más caro, porque cada buque movilizado al Golfo Pérsico necesita más de 4.500 tripulantes para mantenerse a flote. Y ahora Yang te va a mostrar paso a paso el operativo militar más caro de la historia moderna en plena ejecución.
And on TV, we'll watch this on TV and the internet together, on YouTube together, okay? And we'll be so impressed by the power of the US military. This is Iran. This is the Strait of Hormuz. Saudi Arabia. Israel is here. Red Sea is here. Iraq is here. Okay? So, in the Strait of Hormuz comes the USS Gerald R. Ford. It is a $13 billion super carrier. Okay? This thing is designed to destroy countries. It is now prowling the Strait of Hormuz to ensure that shipping is safe. America establishes air supremacy very quickly, okay? Meaning that it has complete control over the skies. Nothing can move in the skies without America detection, okay? And then a massive invasion force is sent to Iran in the south. 100,000 US troops land. Maybe 200,000 Saudi Arabia troops land, okay? Maybe you have 200,000 to 500,000 troops in Iran. And they are about to strike Tehran in the north, okay? So in the south, the United States and its allies have established a foothold. They have a huge presence in the country, and they're about to attack Tehran, okay? All right. Do you understand what has happened? Okay. Now I want to ask you this question. At this point, I think the war has been decided. Who has won the war? America has established air supremacy. It controls the skies. U.S. Navy controls the seas. You have 100,000 US troops in country ready to strike Tehran. The war has been decided. Who has won the war? Okay, obviously this is a trick question. Obviously Iran has won the war. Why?
Lo que el Pentágono no quiere admitir es que el territorio iraní está protegido por la cordillera de los Zagros, con picos que superan los 4.000 metros de altura. Mover un tanque Abrams M1 de 60 toneladas por esos caminos de montaña estrechos y sin asfaltar, bajo fuego de artillería enemiga, es operacionalmente imposible. Pero ese no es el peor problema que va a enfrentar el ejército invasor en las próximas semanas.
In traditional military doctrine, you have three principles, right? Mass forces, avoid encirclement, protect supply lines. Okay? These are three things you must absolutely obey if you are going to war. Okay? So using traditional military doctrine, explain to me why the United States has lost the war right now. Exactly. First of all, they're encircled, okay? Do you know why? Because Iran are all mountains. It's a fortress. Okay? Meaning that to get these troops into the country, you have to airdrop them. Right? But guys, once you're in the country, you can't get them out of the country. You understand? Okay, so that's the first problem. They've been encircled. Right? What's the second problem?
They can't actually go north.
Why not?
Like it's too heavily defended because of all the mountains.
That's right. And why else?
And like it's very hard to move like tanks and equipment through mountains.
Yeah, that's right, okay? So they failed to mass forces, okay? Iran is a population of 90 million people. You will need at least 3 to 4 million soldiers to even think about conquering the country. They've got 100,000 in this country, okay? And as Jack says, you can't move tanks through mountains. They're not designed for mountain warfare. What are you going to do? Okay? So they can't mass forces, and they've been encircled, and what else is a problem? And this is the biggest problem. Exactly. They cannot be resupplied, okay? They have no supply lines. For them to be resupplied, airplanes have to drop ammunition, food, into the country. But again, Iran is all mountains. So it's very easy for Iranians to shoot down the airplanes. Does that make sense? When you pass through mountains, you can't see what's on the ground. A random guy with a rocket launcher can just shoot down the helicopter, okay? Which is what the Afghans did against the Soviets in the Afghanistan war. And that's why the Soviets lost the war. A drone can take down any airplanes, okay?
Pero hay otro error de cálculo más profundo en el plan de Washington, y es asumir que los iraníes van a aplaudir a las tropas invasoras. En agosto de 1953, la CIA ejecutó la operación Ajax para derrocar al primer ministro iraní Mohammad Mossadegh, que se había atrevido a nacionalizar el petróleo. Después instalaron al Shah en el poder y financiaron a su policía secreta, la SAVAK, que torturó a miles de disidentes, hasta la revolución de 1979. Esa memoria histórica no se borra con un comunicado de prensa, y todavía hay otra herida más reciente, que define cómo van a recibir a los soldados estadounidenses.
America destroyed Iraq, right? From 2003 into 2011, America was there destroying the country. America said that it would bring freedom, democracy. It would bring prosperity. It would bring wealth. But instead, it just destroyed the country. American soldiers were running into houses every night, pointing guns at children, destroying homes, and arresting men for no reason, okay? Iranians saw all this on TV. They heard about all this from neighbors, okay? So they know that if America comes, it's to destroy the country, not to bring freedom, democracy, not to bring prosperity, it's to destroy the country. That's why they're gonna fight, okay? And another reason is that Iranians think that they belong to a great civilization. So they value their freedom and independence, okay? Does that make sense? They're not going to submit to a foreign conqueror. So, why else would the Iranians resist? Okay. Also religion, right? The Iranians are religious. They believe that America is Satan, and they have a duty, a religious obligation to fight Satan, okay? So for many reasons, there's just no way that Iranian people are going to stand with America. You might have a minority, but most are going to resist, okay? Okay, so does that make sense?
Creer que conquistas una nación hostil de 90 millones de habitantes con 100.000 soldados es el mismo defecto mental que ha hundido a todos los imperios anteriores. Hoy Estados Unidos sostiene unos 170.000 militares, repartidos en más de 80 países, con un gasto militar anual que supera los 850.000 millones de dólares. Pero esta lógica de cuanto más territorio mejor no la inventó el Pentágono moderno. Hace más de 2.400 años un imperio en su pico ya había apostado toda una expedición lejana y terminó destruido punto por punto como el plan que acabas de ver.
Remember that we studied Thucydides, the Peloponnesian War, last semester, okay? So we will now discuss the Peloponnesian War. The year is 415 BCE. And for the past 17 years, Athens have been fighting a brutal war against Sparta, okay? It's a stalemate. And then for whatever reason, a man named Alcibiades, okay, has a suggestion. Okay, and his suggestion is to win the war against Sparta, let's go invade Sicily. And Nicias, his opponent, is like, why the hell would we want to invade Sicily? It's far away. And Alcibiades is like, well, because it has a lot of money. And if we invade the country, we can take their money. Okay? And it turned out, by making this argument, the people of Athens really support this argument, okay? Because the reason why is, war was costing them a lot of money. And they become addicted to the easy money of empire, okay? So they want to fight this war. So Nicias has this great idea of how to convince people not to go to war, okay? And what he says to the people is, okay guys, I know you want to fight this war. I know that you think this war is a good idea, but Sicily is a huge place. It has a navy. Therefore, we need a massive expedition force against Syracuse and Sicily, okay? We need at least 5,000 soldiers. That's a lot, okay? Because the total Athenian population is about 50,000 people, okay? 5,000 soldiers is a lot for Athens. And we need about 100 ships. And the idea is, Nicias is trying to scare people into not agreeing to not fight, okay? That's the idea. The Athenians say, that's a great idea. Let's send a massive force against Sicily and Syracuse so the war can be won just like that, okay? Shock and awe. So the problem, though, is that never before in its history has Athens sent a large expedition force against another power, okay? Does that make sense? When the Persians invaded, they were invading Athens. Athens didn't go invade Persia. So when you have sent a massive expedition force against another country, what is your number one problem? What is the thing that you must resolve? But the Athenians didn't really think about it because they had absolutely no experience in fighting a foreign war. Okay, so the enemy knows the terrain better than you do, okay? But there's actually a much bigger problem than that. And it is what? Okay, the biggest problem is resupply. And this is something that the Athenians didn't think about because they never never fought a war like this before, okay? So they sent this huge expedition against Sicily. And Syracuse, which was a naval power, were surprised because they were like, why would the Athenians want to invade us, okay? So for the first year, the Athenians were destroying the Syracuse army. And the Syracuse army had to retreat back into their city, okay? And so the Athenians laid siege to the city. Okay, the Athenians, Syracuse is here, the Athenians are here. And the Athenians control the sea, right? Okay? So this situation is very similar to this situation, okay? Do you understand? But then what happened was that the Athenians couldn't resupply themselves. And the reason why is Syracuse also had a navy, and they could stop the Athenian navy from resupplying the Athenian troops. And therefore, the Athenian army was wiped out in Sicily. And this caused the Athenians to ultimately lose the war against Sparta, and it caused the Athenian Empire to collapse. Okay? Do you understand? And again, historians have been trying to figure out for a long time why the Athenians would do such a stupid thing as to send a huge army against Syracuse. Because the risk of failure was catastrophic. Okay? And the only answer is, well, the Athenians had hubris, okay? They never really lost the war, and they had become addicted to empire, which is the same situation America finds itself in today. Okay?
El mismo error que hundió a ese imperio antiguo lo cometió Estados Unidos en pleno siglo XX, con todos los satélites y supercomputadoras del Pentágono mirando. En abril de 1969 llegaron a tener 543,000 soldados desplegados al mismo tiempo en Vietnam, una cifra que hasta hoy es el pico histórico de fuerza terrestre estadounidense fuera de su territorio. La guerra completa consumió 168,000 millones de dólares de la época, el equivalente a más de $1 billón de hoy. Y a continuación vas a entender el truco psicológico exacto, por el que un gobierno con todos los recursos del mundo igual no puede frenar una guerra que ya tiene perdida.
So, in the beginning of 1960, okay, the beginning of the decade, most Americans have never heard of a country called Vietnam. Okay? Most Americans didn't know what it was, didn't know where it was, okay? By the end of the decade, in 1969, 500,000 American soldiers were in the country, destroying everything, okay? But also getting destroyed themselves. 58,000 US soldiers died in Vietnam. So the question then is, how did this happen? Why would this happen? 1960, Vietnam was a distant country no one's ever heard of. By the end of the decade, 500,000 US soldiers were in country fighting this war against an enemy they really didn't know. Okay? In 1971, the Pentagon Papers came out. And the Pentagon Papers was a history of America's involvement in the Vietnam War dating back to the 1950s, okay? And it made 3 major points. The first point is that American leadership, military leadership, has been expanding the war in Vietnam without public knowledge, okay? This is what we call mission creep. So maybe at first they sent some observers to the country, then they sent some advisors, then trainers, then soldiers, okay? So mission creep. Slowly over time, things escalate. And you don't really understand why things escalate, but they do, okay? Second point is that American leadership, from very early on, knew the war was unwinnable. This was the greatest military in the world. They dropped more bombs in Vietnam in the 60s than all bombs were dropped in World War II, okay? And the answer is credibility, okay? Credibility just means they didn't want to lose face. They didn't want to be laughed at by the Chinese and by the Soviets and by the Europeans, okay? But there's actually another way to understand credibility, and it's what we call the sunk cost fallacy. Okay? Have you guys heard of the sunk cost fallacy? And the idea is never ever go into a casino. The reason why is that when you go into a casino and you start losing money, at some point you cannot leave the casino. Why not?
You feel like you've lost so much, so now you have to make it back.
Exactly. You want to reclaim the money you've lost, okay? You've invested so much that you cannot leave. You have to get that money back. And that's the problem with war. Eventually, you've invested so much, you cannot leave the war. And that's what happened in Vietnam. America invested so much, it didn't want to leave the war because it did not want to admit that all this has been lost. Okay? It's what we call the sunk cost fallacy. And that's why even though America could not win the war, it still wanted to fight the war. Okay, does that make sense? Okay, so the Vietnam War is another example, okay, that is similar to this, where
Cuando se te acaba la opción convencional y todavía tienes 100.000 soldados encerrados en territorio enemigo, queda un único recurso sobre la mesa, y ese recurso se llama nuclear táctico. Estados Unidos mantiene cerca de 100 bombas B-61, desplegadas en 6 bases europeas, con rendimiento variable de hasta 50 kilotones, diseñadas justamente para destruir búnkeres iraníes enterrados bajo montaña. Sobre el papel, ese tipo de arma vuelve a poner a Washington en posición de fuerza, pero la jugada que viene a continuación llega desde el costado más inesperado del tablero, y deja a la Casa Blanca con menos opciones que al principio.
the United States has nuclear weapons, which is its ultimate trump card, right? So what Trump can say to Tehran is like, I have 100,000 troops in country. You have to let them go, or I will nuke you. Okay? Do you understand? Trump can say that. Listen, I'm Trump. I'm Donald Trump. I need to look strong. I have 100,000 troops in the country. I can't get them out of the country. So he says to Tehran, you either let them go, okay? You either guarantee him safe passage out of the country, or I will nuke you. Right? So that's what will happen. That is what Donald Trump will do. Once the situation arises, the only way for Donald Trump to save face is to threaten Tehran and says, you either let my guys go, or I will nuke the entire country. Right? So, how does Tehran get out of this situation? How do the Iranians protect themselves against this possibility? Because you're absolutely right. This is exactly what will happen if this situation will arise. Trump will respond with nuclear weapons, or the threat of nuclear weapons. So what must the Iranians do to protect themselves against this possibility? Who can help the Iranians now? Russia. Okay, do you understand? So before this war happens, Iran and Russia must come to an agreement where Putin says from the onset, no one is allowed to use nuclear weapons. Okay? If Iran uses nuclear weapons, I will nuke Iran. If the United States uses nuclear weapons, I will nuke the United States. If Israel uses nuclear weapons, I will nuke Israel. Okay? If Putin says that, how will the world react? If Putin says this, you are not allowed to use nuclear weapons, how will the world react? He's a hero, right? He saved humanity. But because he says this, the United States is now trapped. Okay? You understand? And so this becomes a black hole for the United States, where they can only send in more troops.
Lo que acabas de aprender no es un ejercicio académico ni una hipótesis para la sobremesa, sino el escenario que el Pentágono ya está modelando en sus simulaciones militares de cada trimestre. La deuda nacional estadounidense ya supera los 36 billones de dólares, y cada hogar promedio carga indirectamente con más de 6.500 dólares al año, solo por sostener el aparato militar federal, sin contar los costos extra de una guerra nueva en territorio enemigo. Si quieres entender cómo se mueve el tablero geopolítico real, antes de que aparezca en los titulares, suscríbete al canal, porque la próxima jugada de los grandes imperios se está escribiendo ahora, y tu billetera ya tiene asignado un rol en esa partida.